Hello and welcome. This is going to be the second lesson on learning Python, and it is about variables, strings, and getting user input. So first, let's talk about variables, and specifically variable names. In Python, the general practice is going to be this right here, where you have the lowercase beginning of the variable name, and then an underscore, and then whatever else you have. Then basically the underscore is just to use a space because you are not allowed to use spaces for the syntax of Python for variable names. Alternatively, what I generally do is I separate words by having the uppercase letter starting with the second word. So if I said that I had a 3 or 4 word rather variable name, I would say var name and then uppercase first letter of the next word, uppercase, and then that basically just separates it and it makes it easier to read. But really, it can be anything that is unique to that variable if you want to have different variables having different values, and again, no spaces. So it can be useful to name variable names things that correspond to what they actually mean. So if we have an age variable, then it would be good to just call it age, because that helps a lot with people who didn't write your code. So say that you're at an office job and someone doesn't really understand what you're doing, but if they look at it and it says age gets 3, then it's kind of obvious what that means. So generally speaking, uh, anything goes so long as it's readable. And another thing that helps with readability is you can comment things. So you have this pound symbol here, and if you have a pound symbol in the beginning of a line, then that creates a comment. So this line is a comment, and therefore it doesn't have any actual impact on the code. It just has a comment and helps with the organization and explaining what it's doing. This can help if, say, you are working on a 1,000-line project and you're going to forget what this specific line does, and so you think ahead and you write this comment. Or again, if you're trying to explain it to other people looking at your code, those are really great. So now assigning variables. So a variable is basically just some storage place in data. So you're assigning to this storage place in data this name and then giving it this value. So in Python, unlike a lot of other programming languages, you don't have to initialize things and you don't have to give variables specific data types. They actually pick up on what the data type is based off of what you're trying to assign to it, which is very cool and somewhat unique to Python. So an assignment statement in Python generally looks like variable name gets. This equals sign is read as gets in Python and most programming languages, and then whatever value you're assigning to it. And then if you want to switch between data types, all you have to do is use a new assignment statement. So let's look at what that looks like. This is a screenshot of something from idle, and we have variable A gets 2, then variable B gets the string hello. So this is an integer, this is a string. And then we're going to print variable A just to check what's in it, and we see that it has 2, and this is an integer. And we can print variable B, and that is hello, and that's to be expected. However, we want to change variable A to be world. So in a lot of other programming languages, you would probably have to cast variable A into a string variable, and it goes through all these other steps. But in Python, it's very convenient. All you do is variable A gets world, and it's a string variable now. So now if we check what variable A contains, it no longer contains 2, it in fact contains world. And then if we wanted to put them together, variable B plus variable A is hello world, as we saw in the previous video. So now, just a shortcut for assigning variables that we're going to be using a lot is just a comma b, if with a space in the middle, it gets hello comma 2. So this does exactly what you probably think it does. A gets assigned hello, b gets assigned 2. So if we print a, b, hello 2. And then this is just another way of printing things. So if I do print and then a string comma an integer, it prints the integer. And luckily, Python is very convenient in the fact that you don't even have to put a space. It knows to do that. Hello space 2. And then you can see where this can be helpful, because if you start assigning a lot of variables to a lot of different things, you can go A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can print all of them. And as you can see, it's very easy compared to doing this for every single line gets its own assignment statement, and then it just gets a lot more cluttered, versus this is a lot more short and sweet. So now strings. We're going to talk a bit about strings. I know we talked about strings in the previous video, but this is going to be a bit more in depth. So if you check out this here, you can notice that in Python, unlike a lot of programming languages, it doesn't actually matter if you use double or single quotes. However, you have to use the same one to contain both of it. So see how this is a double quote? That means that this string will end with a double quote, and this one is a single quote, and this one will end with a single quote. And we can see that quote 1 and quote 2 both work exactly the same. And now a lot of people might say, well, that's not useful at all. I'll just use double quote or always use single quote. And that's fine, but it can be useful because that means that if you start with a single quote here, that means a double quote no longer ends the string, which is very important if you say want to print said double quote. So she said, yes, they are useful. And then we have a double quote here, and then this single quote is what actually ends it. So if we check what this prints, we say, she said, yes, they are useful, and we can in fact see that they are useful. And that's somewhat of a way around one of the escape characters that Python uses. These are the three basic escape characters that this language uses and a lot of other languages use, and these are the ones that you're going to use. So what is an escape character? Well, specifically the escape character is this backslash here. And when you see a backslash in a string, what that means is what follows it will likely give it a command so that it prints it in a different way than it normally would. So we see text1, this variable here. This is a string variable. We know that because we see the double quotes. And in the beginning, we see backslash t, and then the quote begin, and the string begins. And so what backslash t means, this is the escape character, and then we see a t, and that means that it's a tab. So you know how paragraphs begin with a little indent? This will indent it. It does the same thing as your tab key on a regular text document, which is very handy if you want to format it and make it all look good. So now the next one you're going to use that's it's used very often in programming, it's used very often in a lot of things, is the backslash n escape character. And so this will help let you skip lines just like this. So this will let you skip lines backslash n like this. And it's important that you notice that you can put them in, even see there's no space between the s and the backslash here, and there's no space between the n and the l here. All this is saying is skip a line right here. And that means that you don't have to start with a space there or have a space there. It's all nice and neat. And then the last one is an alternative way of using she said, yes, they are useful. Here is an alternative for using quotes. So backslash quotation mark, backslash quotation mark. Basically, backslash quotation mark is another way of getting quotes in here. So you notice how this starts with a quote, or double quote. And you would think that at the first double quote, the string ends. However, we have a backslash here. So this is an escape character, and therefore it's going to print this backslash, which is very useful. It's a lot more useful in other languages that don't give you this option, but still all the same, it helps you do that. So now working with strings, there's a lot of different things that you can do with strings in order to check for different things, but these are just like very, very basic things that you can do. So a lot of times you're going to want to know what the length of a string is. And in this instance, it's just going to tell us the number of characters. So text1 gets this string is 28 characters. Well, let's see if that is in fact the case. We're going to print the length of text1, 28. So by putting length and then in parentheses the variable text1 is the same thing as putting length parentheses then this string here, because this string is contained in this variable. So therefore length of that variable is 28, just as the text said. So that's great. However, if we want to work with variable or strings, we have to understand how indices work. So what is an index? An index for a string is basically saying what placeholder that variable or that character is at in the string. So indices will always start at 0. As we can see in this example, if we have the string example, the first character is 0, not 1. That's very important to notice because that means that as you move left to right, we're going to end on 1 minus the length of the string. So we see that example is obviously a 7-letter word, and so we have 6 as our last index because that is 7 minus 1. An important thing to note that you're not going to see in this example is that spaces do in fact count as characters or indexes. So this right here we can see has an index. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3. This space is the index 4. And so that's important because it also counts. So this is index 27. It's not taking out these 4 spaces. So that can mess you up, especially in the beginning when you're trying to figure out where to get the different parts of the string. So now what can we do with that information? Well, if we want to print only a specific part of the string, we have to know what index we want out of the string. So if we take this phrase example and we print the phrase at 3, it's important to notice the syntax here. We're phrase and then the bracket sign 3 close bracket. So that's going to print the character at index 3. And if we check our chart here, we see that it's M, and that is in fact what is printed, which is fantastic. And now what happens if we want to print a range of characters? Well, in that case, you're going to want to print whatever your first character is, and then whatever the index of the character after the last character you want to print is. So that might be a little confusing, so let's look at the example. So if we wanted to print the indices 1 through 2, then we're going to write phrase 1 to 3 with a colon separating them. And so what that does is it says we're going to start here and we're going to end here, but we do not print number 3, index 3. So we print 1, 2, stop at 3. So XA, and that is in fact what is printed. But what happens if we just want to print everything past a certain point? So if we wanted to print index 5 to the end, what we would do is 5 colon and then nothing, because we're just telling it print to the end. So if we check what's at 5, we see that is L. And then if we check what is at 6, we see that is E, so, and 6 is the end, so that's where it's going to stop. So we go phrase 5 to the end, LE. Fantastic, that's exactly what we thought it was going to do. And now, similarly to what we saw in this example right here, where we stopped and did not print the last character that we gave it, if we want to print everything up to, but not including the last index that we give it, we do nothing colon 5 in the brackets. So this is going to print everything from the first index, index 0, to index 4, which is the index before this one. So if we look at this, we see we want to start at the beginning and stop at 5, but not print 5. So we see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 5, we stop, don't print that. So we just want EXAMP. And that is exactly what is printed. And that's just what we wanted. So let's move on. This is somewhat confusing to look at, but if you just get used to these 4 examples here, this will help you a lot with working with strings in the future. Okay, so combining strings. This is known as concatenation, and basically all we're going to want to do is use a plus sign between the strings in order to say we want to concatenate or combine these things. So we're assigning A hello and B there. So we want to print A plus a space plus B. So we're concatenating A with a space and then concatenating B. So we have hello space there, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. However, you don't just have to concatenate in a print statement. You can also concatenate in a variable statement. So we have C gets A plus space plus B. So we're concatenating A space and B, and then we're going to print C and see, oh, yep, C does in fact contain hello there. It's the exact same. So either way, it works. That's fine. However, if you want to concatenate with integer variables, it can get a little bit weird. So we're assigning A number colon and B we're assigning to 2. So normally up here, we would just have to print A plus B. But we can see that we're getting this traceback error, and basically it doesn't like that because you can only concatenate string, not int, to string. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that we can either cast the variable B as a string, so A plus the string of B, str, and then parentheses here around some variable or some integer. We'll give it a string variable instead, and so we can see number colon 2. Or another way around this would be to do what we did in the previous example on this page, where we had print A comma B hello 2. Basically what that does is we have a string variable here, comma an integer, and it puts in a space for us right here, which is very good. So it says number colon space 2. So it puts a space before the integer. That's even better than this one, because if we wanted to put a space in here, we would have to concatenate it ourselves. So a lot of the times, if we're just going to try to put a number on the end of a string, this is the one that we want to use. So for user input, what we have in Python is a lot simpler than a lot of other languages that might need to use a scanner or something like that, which Java would need to do. And in Python, when you want to get information from the user, all you're going to do is assign to a variable the words input and then some prompt, and then that's all you need to do for strings. Or if you want to get some sort of number or integer from them, you put an eval in parentheses and then put this same thing, and that's how you do it for integers. So again, that might be a little confusing, so let's look at an example. We have name, which is our variable, gets some input, and then this is our prompt. So please enter your name, colon, space, quotation mark. And the reason why we did a space here is because when the user gets this, it says, please enter your name, colon, space, and then the user actually types this in. So I typed in Python, and then that assigned Python to name. So when we printed name, it came up as Python, exactly what we typed in, which is what we wanted. However, if we want to turn the strings into numbers, this isn't going to work out very well because we want it to be an integer variable, and input returns a string variable. So if we have an age here and we're assigning age gets eval, this is important for the integers, input, please enter your name, or please enter your age here, pardon me, colon, space, we now see that if we enter our age of 105, obviously, because we're Albus Dumbledore, even though he's about 150, we now have age set to the variable 105. And now, just to check to make sure that this is in fact an integer and not a string, we're going to try to do a little basic math here. So if we do print age plus 10, it prints 115. 105 plus 10 is 115, which is absolutely perfect. That's what we wanted. So we can see for a fact that this is an integer stored on age, not a string, because if this were a string, we would get this traceback error that we had before. Okay, so let's open up idle and check out a program that uses everything that we just learned. So let's open up this program, save to the desktop, user input and strings, perfect. This is what we want. So I'm not going to read through this right now, but I will run it and see what it does. So what do we want more of? We want more keyboards, of course. We only have one keyboard, the one I'm typing on. How many do we want? Obviously, I want 32 keyboards because who doesn't want 32 keyboards? And this tells me that I need 31 more keyboards. That makes sense. I said I have one and I want 32, so I need 31. So now let's butcher this sentence. This sentence here, let's see. Let's give it a number between 0 and 26. Let's say the number 4. How about that? And a number between 5 and 26. Let's say 9. Give me the word need, and we can see since we highlight over that we get a space too. So let's see, why would it have done that? If we check out this sentence, which supposedly we butchered, we see that this is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, we started at n for need, and we give it 4, so that makes sense, I guess. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, 9. Well, why wouldn't it have printed this 3? Oh, well, I know. Because over here, if we check out what the output is over here, if we gave it 4 and 9, then it's not going to print whatever it is, because remember, we stop for strings, right? So we have need space. Okay, so now let's check out how we did this. Here, we can see we asked, what do you want more of? And we gave it keyboards. That's stored in string 1. Then we said, how many of whatever we stored there? So keyboards do you currently have? We told it 1. Okay, so how many do you want? We said 32. So it calculated the difference. 32 minus 1 is obviously 31. And then we made it a string so that we can concatenate it and put it in this output variable. And we printed that output. And as we can see, the output was you need 31 more keyboards. So now let's check out what the length of that is. Well, the length is going to be 26. So when we get length gets stored, length output, we see that we are giving length the string variable of whatever length this is. That way we can concatenate it. So we're going to give a number between 0 and whatever the length is, and we say 26, and then we're going to say give a number between whatever number you just gave, and again, whatever the length is. So we gave it 4, so 4 plus 1 is 5, and so we say between 5 and 26. That way they can't give something that doesn't really work that well. And then we're going to print whatever that output is, starting at that character and ending at the character, but stopping and not printing that character. So we can see that's how that worked here. And while I just went through that very quickly, I really want you to be able to look at this code and know what it does. So if you can't look at this code and know what it does just by looking at it and not having me explain it very in depth all the way through, then perhaps you should look back at the slides and get a better sense of what we're actually doing here. Because this is very, very key to Python, and you need to understand what this stuff does. And so what I would ask you to do is do something along the lines of this program here without looking at what I have done here. So you should ask for, we'll put it in a comment, ask for some input in a string, and then you should ask for some input in a number, and then you should concatenate them using one of the two methods that we talked about. Concatenate them, and then you want to take only part of the string. And if you can make a program that does this, then you're probably in pretty good shape as long as you understand all the concepts that we talked about.